Hey there, friends. I'm meteorologist Robert Speta. A far cry from 24 hours ago here with our Weather Impact Live. Yesterday, of course, we were tracking severe storms moving across the First Coast. A lot of widespread, very beneficial rainfall. We even had some severe thunderstorms south of Jacksonville. But overall, the storms that we did see, plenty of lightning, but no real damaging conditions with them. Which was great, obviously. The great news, too, was just some absolutely fantastic beneficial rainfall. Now we're into a drier weather pattern. As we go ahead through our Sunday, Monday, and the Tuesday, we're staying relatively cooler, too, so fire weather risk still there, even though we did get the rain. It's still dry out there. The soil's still dry. And then we go to Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We got the rebound back up into the lower 90s. But as I mentioned, some very beneficial rainfall here on the First Coast. Some areas, southeast Georgia, getting up and over an inch. Waycross officially reported 1.4. I did see radar indicated totals nearing 2 inches in spots there. Nahunta, upwards of an inch of rain. We need several inches in that area, to be quite frank. But one is a start. With this, our next real chance of rain could be arriving next weekend, but I don't think it's going to be quite as much as we've seen here yesterday. But definitely a very welcome sight. If we had that daily for the course of several weeks, we'd probably be in really good shape, but we'll take even just one day out here on the First Coast, just seeing a little of that rain. Let's actually look at the drought right now all across the southeast, but especially where we have the wildfires going on, like Clinch, Brantley, even out towards Columbia County, just so freakishly dry in spots out here. Closer to Jacksonville, we're starting an extreme drought. Doesn't make it any better. I mean, it's still dry, but out west, this is the type of stuff where like a spark starts a fire because it just hits the ground, and the ground is so dry and burnable. It's like if you just have paper, it just goes right up. So yeah, that's the big thing. We need the precip, need the rain here, and it's not until about next week, and then we do start to see a little bit of that rainfall. Taking a look at our temperatures across the United States, actually had a little bit of frost into the southeast, or excuse me, not southeast, my goodness, northeast. Southeast we did head into the 40s earlier on this morning. There into like Valdosta, closer to the First Coast. So definitely a lot cooler. But, taking a look at our extended outlook, as I mentioned, we got these ups and downs here. Big thing, though, right now is that at least here for the Shrimp Festival, weather's looking pretty good. We actually have temperatures into the 60s to 70s. If you do want to head out to that, I know yesterday it was just a ton of rain. Not terribly pleasant whatsoever. The high today, though, here at I'll take a look at that 76 degrees there with mostly sunny skies in the forecast. So good news with that. We're talking about even heading back to school. Just give it like 3 weeks so we start to see graduation ceremonies out here on the First Coast. Summer break really by the end of May. It feels like we just finished Christmas and spring break, and now we're heading to summer break, but it's the way the cookie crumbles here, I guess. 84 degrees for a high on Tuesday. Still looking at partly cloudy skies, but a lot warmer. It also starts on Tuesday is the Aquarius meteor shower, too. That's pretty cool. Could see upwards of 30 or 10 to 30 meteors per hour if you're in a dark area. If you're in the southern hemisphere, it's even 50 meteors per hour. Comes from Halley's Comet, which is kind of neat. Just a little tidbit with that. But looking at the broader picture of things here. Ooh, I think I hit the wrong button. Looking at the broader picture of things here, though, we look across the country. We got our next high pressure moving in, and then we got another front behind that. So some ups and downs in the forecast here. And, one way that we talk about the forecast and one way we help forecast the weather is those initial observations that come out from the National Weather Service via weather balloons. So with that said, I'm trying to, add a little information, especially after yesterday's storms, when we were really looking at the weather balloon information throughout the upper atmosphere from surface all the way up to the top. We questioned, okay, so how does this impact the weather? How does it influence? And how do you get that initial data? So I went out to the National Weather Service here. Beardless Robert, this video was taken a little while ago, to talk to them about how they launch weather balloons and why it's so important. So let's check that out. Meteorology is a science, and like any field of science, the information you start with is going to impact your outcome. In weather, that means real-time accurate data to start to create your forecast. Now, getting surface observational data is simple. You can use a thermometer. There's various weather stations around, but how do you get information for what's happening above our heads throughout the atmosphere?
I'm Deidre Dolan. I'm a meteorologist here at WFO Jacksonville with the National Weather Service, and today we're going to launch a weather balloon.
Over 90 sites across the country do this at least twice a day to collect weather data.
Balloon, which is basically a giant balloon, almost like a party balloon, but a bit thicker and heavy duty so that it can make it all the way up in the atmosphere. And that rises about 90,000 to 100,000 feet up in the atmosphere, and that takes measurements of temperature, humidity, pressure, wind speed, and we also put that that data into our weather models.
Remember, the more accurate information you can put into the model, the better result you will get back.
And so we rig up the balloon to a nozzle that will fill it with hydrogen.
So now she's filling up the balloon with hydrogen. As this sign shows over here, it is very flammable. So thus, no phones or electronics inside the balloon house.
And then once it fills with hydrogen, it lifts a weight that's connected to the table, so we know exactly how much hydrogen is in the balloon. And then once it lifts, it will automatically shut off, and then we can shut off the hydrogen and safely tie off the balloon for launch.
Now time for the fun part. Attached to the balloon is a 100-foot cord, and attached to that is the radiosonde carrying all those important weather sensors. Here we go. A successful launch. Now the balloon is cruising upwards, collecting meteorological data.
So over here we have our data, up here we have our tracking display, and we have a graph format of all the data we're getting, temperature, humidity, pressure, and wind, and then we can see where it is relative to us.
The balloon does eventually pop, and the radiosonde falls back to Earth via a parachute. And yes, sometimes it can fall into your backyard. So what should you do?
It's not dangerous at all, and that's the point of the parachute, is to slow it down, so it's not dangerous to anything. It won't cause any damage, but it is labeled on the side, National Weather Service instrument. Do not be afraid, this is completely safe. And inside, there's a tube attached to the radiosonde, and it has a mailing bag. So if you find one of these sondes, you can just take out the mailing bag and mail it directly back to us.
And that is just one of the many factors that goes into creating a forecast. At the National Weather Service office in Jacksonville, I'm meteorologist Robert Spetta, First Coast News, on your side.
That is the Protector.
This truck is a beast.
It's got all the tools on it. I love how big the tires are.
And this is going to be able to show you the weather around the First Coast like you've never seen it before.
The Protector really is going to help protect the community.
So you can see what it looks like on the ground. And that allows folks to really take action and do something about it.
And it gives us that edge in continuing to be the most accurate weather team.
Sponsored by HananiahAutos.com.
I'm Keitha Nelson. Good morning, Jacksonville anchor and mom of twins, Journey and Trey. I'm on your side, getting you out the door and off to a great start. Make the move. So Good Morning Jacksonville on First Coast News. Weekdays from 4:30 to 9, anywhere you watch.
First Coast Living Live.
Bringing you closer to the tastiest food.
The best shopping.
And family fun. Woo!
Jordan Wilkerson and David Benfield. First Coast Living Live. Weekdays at 11 a.m. only on NBC 12.
We have new details about a heavy police presence in Jacksonville Beach.
Driver fired gunshots along the interstate today, prompting a police chase.
Stream extended coverage on First Coast News Plus.
The First Coast News weather team is here to deliver your most accurate forecast with weather impact alerts to warn you about severe weather and up-to-the-minute information on First Coast News Plus.
The wave of moisture rolls its way on in here.
Our team is the most equipped and experienced to help you prepare and keep you safe.
The First Coast News weather team is always on your side. Stream extended coverage on First Coast News Plus.
All right, so that's a look at how you make that near-term forecast, but I also do want to switch up gears and talk about the tropics as well, because right now let's actually take a look at this, 29 days away from the start, yes, of hurricane season. And also today is the start of our hurricane prep week. Actually, it's the 3rd through the 9th here, and day 1 is know your risk. Consider threats from storm surge, heavy rain, and yes, rip currents. And also know your evacuation zone. So make sure you're staying updated with all of that. Now, to talk about knowing your risk and hurricane prep week and everything else that you should start thinking about as we head into hurricane season, I talked to the director of the National Hurricane Center, Michael Brennan, about all of that. So let's talk to him. The National Hurricane Center gives us plenty of vital information about tropical systems, not only active ones, but also looking ahead and how we should prepare for the upcoming threat of tropical weather. And I talked to the head of the National Hurricane Center about that. So here's a look at that interview. As we head into the 2025 hurricane season, let's say I am somebody brand new to the Gulf Coast of Florida. What do you think are just some of the main things that they should, and I know it's a broad question, but you kind of, what are some of the main things that you think they should be ready for, prepare for, they should have in the back of their mind?
Yeah, for somebody who's moving to a hurricane-prone area the first time, you really have to start out by understanding what your risk is. Do you live in an area where you're susceptible to storm surge? That could be on the coast of Duval County. It could be along the St. Johns River. Or do you live inland and freshwater flooding from heavy rainfall is your biggest threat? Everybody's susceptible to wind impacts and tornado impacts. There's also the threat of rip currents along the coast. So it's really about understanding what the risk is where you live and developing a plan to keep you and your family safe based on that risk. So the most important thing is to find out if you live in a storm surge evacuation zone, because if you do, you could be asked by local officials to leave your home. You need to have a plan for how you're going to leave, how you're going to go, where you're going to go, how you're going to get there. And it's important to remind people that you don't always have to drive hundreds of miles or out of the state of Florida to get to a safe place in advance of a hurricane. You really just need to drive out of that storm surge evacuation zone and get to a safe place, a shelter, the home of a friend or loved one, where you can safely ride out the storm. And that might only mean driving 10 or 20 miles inland away from that storm surge threat to get to a safe place. And the other thing is, again, identify your home structural risks. Are you in a mobile home where you might be asked to leave even for a tropical storm? Are you in a flood-prone area that might need to be evacuated near a creek or a stream? And then finally, you want to think about supply kit. You want to have a disaster supply kit handy, not just for tropical storms and hurricanes, but for any other emergency, multiple days of food, water, batteries, medicine, charging devices for your phone, and just ways that your equipment and supplies that you're going to need to be self-sufficient for several days in the aftermath of a storm where you might not have power.
And to kind of carry off of what you were just talking about, as far as getting prepared, especially if a storm is right on your doorstep. I know last year we started with the experimented cone graphics, and this year you're carrying on them again. Is there any changes from last year? And could you talk about maybe some lessons learned from last year, especially since we did have multiple storms that had impacts well inland?
Yeah, you're right. The experimental cone, this is an example of it from Milton last year. We rolled that out in August, so it was around during Helene and Milton in particular, two of the more impactful hurricanes we had, both of which made landfall in Florida. So the experimental cone shows the extent of tropical storm and hurricane watches and warnings over inland areas. And you can see that in this case, almost the entire Florida peninsula was under some type of tropical storm or hurricane watch or warning. And again, showing that wind risk extends well outside the cone itself, which only tells you about where the center of the storm might go. You can see that Milton was a pretty big storm by the time it got to the Florida peninsula, brought those impacts over a wide area. So we got a lot of positive feedback about the cone, the experimental one last year, so we're continuing it this season. The only real substantial change is this area where we have a hurricane watch and a tropical storm warning in effect. We added a little more clear legend about what that means, this pink and blue hatching area. But overall, we're going to continue it this year. Have it available on hurricanes.gov, continue to gather comments and feedback and decide how to make any additional changes or whether to make it operational after the 2025 hurricane season.
And I guess to even carry and build on top of that, because another thing that I noticed in our press release here was that the cone is getting smaller. So
Yeah.
can you just touch on, I think most people understand that means, you know, the forecast is getting more accurate, but can you just touch on kind of what goes into the cone of air and to kind of build even more on top of that with a smaller cone? What do you think are some of the forecasts? Because I've seen this personally, the forecast challenges that go with a smaller cone of air and communicating to the broader public.
Yeah, so the cone really represents the likely path of the center of the storm. So this is the forecast for Milton here across the Gulf and across Florida and in the Western Atlantic. And these dots represent our official forecast of where we expect the center to be. And then the cone tells you where the center will be about 2/3 of the time. But it's based on our track forecast errors over the previous 5 years. So we had a pretty successful year for forecasting track in 2024. We set record low errors on average. So as those numbers come into the calculation and we drop off the earlier year, the cone is going to be about 5% smaller. So really not a huge change, probably wouldn't even be really perceptible to most people. But it does indicate that on average, track forecast errors are a lot smaller than they were, say 20 years ago. If you look back at a cone from 2005, it's going to be much, much bigger. It'd probably cover most of the state of Florida. But that does create a messaging challenge in the fact that, people need to realize that the cone just tells you where the center is going to be, likely. It doesn't tell you where the impacts are going to be. So the cone is just sort of a broad scale look at where the center of the tropical storm or hurricane is forecast or is likely to be. The watches and warnings and the other information for wind and storm surge, flooding, tornadoes tell you about the hazards. It would be really difficult, if not impossible, to indicate all that hazard information on a single graphic. So that's why we have different graphics that convey those different hazards and what those risks are.
And speaking of graphics and hazards, that really builds right into my next question, because, and this is actually a question not only for the general public, but also for me, the broadcaster. From your experience, because I could show somebody a satellite picture all day, and the big storms, people more or less ooh at it. They go, ooh, it's pretty. It doesn't translate to on the ground. So what do you think is some of the most important things as broadcasters we should be doing to help relay some of that vital information? Because the cone is great, but, the Saffir-Simpson scale, but I don't think sometimes that translates to storm surge. So I'll let you take it away, because I assume you know where I'm kind of going with this, but it's a hard time sometimes relaying some of that vital information.
Yeah, the focus really needs to be on the hazards. And a lot of times those are covered by watches and warnings, like the wind ones you see here, the storm surge watches and warnings that highlight areas at risk for life-threatening storm surge inundation, flood watches and warnings, tornado watches and warnings. So again, because those hazards really vary in time and space during a storm, you have to focus on those hazards individually, but then also, collectively for the entire storm, for everybody, say in your viewing area, which includes people at the coast, people inland. They have different risks. So people need to understand what their risks are and really seek out the information that's related to what their risk profile is, or where they live, or where their business is located, to make sure they can get that vital information. The good news is that we can push information to people too. When we issue a storm surge or hurricane warning, that triggers a wireless emergency alert on people's cell phones based on where they're located. So if the warning is in effect for your area, you're going to get notified of that. People need to find their trusted sources of information, their broadcast meteorologist that they watch every day, who's going to be able to help guide them through the information that's coming out during a storm, which can be somewhat overwhelming at times because there is a lot of information, not just coming from the National Hurricane Center or your local National Weather Service office, but in the larger sort of media ecosystem that includes not just traditional media, but social media. So it's important for people to have those trusted sources of information, find them now so that they're not looking for them during a storm.
And I'll jump into this question here, as I heard you mention the different ways things are getting pushed and social media, and you kind of already answered it, but just kind of ask in a broader scope. You started in 2008 or late 2000s, right at the NHC? What do you think from your perspective as relaying that information and the public's perspective is the biggest change in the way they get the information about hurricanes? But not only that, the way they kind of process it. For example, I know evacuations used to be a lot broader back then. Now it's a lot more concise. So just from your perspective, what do you think in the last almost 20 years has been the biggest change?
Yeah, I think, well, the way people consume information is rapidly changing. You live this every day. You're in traditional media, and there's still a lot of people that, especially in an emergency like a hurricane, turn on the television and watch their local television stations to get information. So we still try to get information to them through the media pool, through the broadcast meteorology community. But we also know people consume information on their phones. Some people don't ever watch television anymore. They have apps, they have social media. So we're trying to push information out through places like live streams and other social media platforms, short videos, to, again, we're not going to get we're not going to be able to provide someone every piece of information they need about a hurricane in a 1-minute reel that we're going to post on Instagram, but we can at least raise awareness and then encourage them to go seek out information through some other channel by coming to our website, looking to their local media, connecting with their local government officials. So it's a way to try to reach people where they are and then try to point them to places where they can get more comprehensive information. So again, you're right, we can provide a lot more detail now. You go back to when I started here at NHC in 2008, we didn't have a watch or warning for storm surge. We weren't able to highlight those areas specifically at risk of life-threatening inundation. Now we can, and as you mentioned, evacuation zones have become a lot more refined. It's not just a whole big chunk of a county. Now it might just be one small piece of a barrier island or an area along the St. Johns River. So as information has gotten more precise, in some ways it's become a little more difficult for people to consume and understand. So we just have to keep making sure that we can get our voice out there with the authoritative information, and that across sort of the weather and hurricane enterprise, we amplify those sources of authoritative information, whether it's coming from us in the National Weather Service or from state and local government officials that are telling people where to evacuate and how to get ready for an event.
Oh, thank you. And one other question I had here is almost on the line of improving technology, is that nowadays we have drones coming in off of planes. We have the sail drone out there. How are these new different recon and areas of technology improving your forecast?
Yeah, a lot of it goes back to the data from the Hurricane Hunter aircraft. So, for example, you can look, here's a radar picture from one of the NOAA Hurricane Hunters flying through the storm out over the ocean where we don't have radar data. All of the ground-based radars are on land. So this is getting us data here that's giving us a view of what the storm looks like from the inside for our forecasters to look at. But this radar data, the precipitations, the structure, the wind field, is all getting into the forecast models that help us predict the track and the intensity of a storm, which then directly plays into where the storm surge is going to be, the heavy rainfall, the wind. So all the aircraft reconnaissance data that come from the Hurricane Hunters going into the models improve those track and intensity forecasts by about 10 to 20%. And that's really been a big change in recent years. And it's also helped us to improve our forecast of rapidly intensifying storms. And if you look back at, say the storms from 2024, we had Helene and Milton in particular that both underwent rapid intensification before landfall. We're out and now actually able to make some of those more aggressive intensity forecasts that we wouldn't have been able to make, say, in 2008 or 9. We just wouldn't have had the confidence to forecast a storm to strengthen by 30 or 40 miles per hour in a 24-hour period. Now we are able to issue those more aggressive forecasts, which get us into the right expectation for setting the level of what types of hazards people might have to be dealing with the storm.
Wow. Thank you, Michael. One last question. Is if there's anything I haven't may have mentioned here for you that you think that heading into the 2025 hurricane season that people absolutely should be at least aware of as we get ready for this upcoming tropical year?
Well, that it doesn't take a hurricane or a major hurricane affecting your area directly to cause substantial life-threatening impacts, especially from freshwater flooding, from heavy rainfall. Has almost nothing to do with how strong a storm is from a wind perspective. A tropical depression, a weak tropical storm can produce life-threatening flooding. And that's been the biggest killer in the United States in tropical storms and hurricanes over the last 10 or so years. It just matters how hard it rains and how long it rains in a particular location. And the other thing I'll touch on is just post-storm safety. We've seen a substantial number of post-storm fatalities in recent years in tropical storms and hurricanes, especially after major hurricanes. When you have long duration power outages, you think about the aftermath of a hurricane in Florida in August or September with no power. It's going to be really hot. People aren't going to have air conditioning. People succumb to heart attacks, other medical issues, just accidents that occur from cleaning up or driving around in an environment after a storm. We lose a lot of people to car accidents. So just a reminder that you don't want to just survive the storm itself. You need to also survive the aftermath, and don't come back to evacuated areas until you've been told it's safe to do so by your local officials.
And that's a good point, because we always seem like we always prepare for that first wave, and then no one really thinks about the weeks afterwards. So really good point there, Mike. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with me here, Dr. Brennan from the National Hurricane Center. I know you got a busy day, so I'll let you get about it. But yeah, thank you so much for taking and answering a couple of my questions. I really appreciate it.
Great to talk to you. Thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, that was the director of the National Hurricane Center. You may have noticed that we were referring a lot of the times to 2024 and 2025. Just so you know, that video, that recording, that interview is a bit old. It's a few months old. We're talking about from last season, but I did figure here on our Sunday morning at the start of Know Your Risk week, it would be a great one, because all the information is still the same as we enter here in 2026. As we get ready for the upcoming hurricane season from May 3rd to 9th, this Hurricane Preparedness Week, and of course, day one is know your risk, consider that threats, and know your evacuation zone. So one of those days where you can just even step outside and just kind of take pictures of your house, just some things to remember as we head to the start of hurricane season, less than a month away. Let's come back to the camera here. We're going to start to sign off, though. Yeah, one of the big things is just, just start to prepare. Hurricane season's less than a month away, and we've had storms in the month of May. I don't see anything there right now, but we'll, of course, continue to keep you posted if anything does develop. Don't forget, at Hurricane Centra at firstcoastnews.com, anytime there is a tropical system, we'll be updating you there. And also, we're not only update stuff here on the First Coast, but all over the United States here this 2026 season. So I hope you found some of that informative. Right now, though, it's dry out there, a lot cooler than it's been for the last few days, so we're not quite tropical yet. You can get out there and enjoy the rest of your Sunday. I'm meteorologist Robert Spetta. Thanks for stopping by.